Welcome back to another exploration of the impossible. Today, we step into a universe reshaped by grief, will, and the power to change everything. In this story, we imagine what would happen if Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch, broke into the Warhammer 40k universe during the Siege of Terra. Her powers of reality itself collide with the laws of the warp, changing the fate of gods, mortals, and existence. What happens when emotion itself becomes law, when love destroys gods and peace kills the soul of creation? This is the story of how one woman's heartbreak unmade the warp, silenced chaos, and remade humanity. But at a price even the Emperor could not bear to watch. In her final act, Wanda doesn't just end gods. She becomes the line between sanity and oblivion. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if it truly resonates with you. The warp was screaming. Not as it usually did, not in the eternal chorus of madness that sang to every psyker's soul, but in silence. A silence so sharp that it cut through the minds of demons and mortals alike. Across Terra's blasted sky, the light of the Imperium dimmed, the Emperor's psychic beacon flickered, and then she appeared. A woman stepped out of the quiet storm, red cloak torn, eyes hollow, power trembling through every atom. Wanda Maximoff had fallen through universes before, but never into something like this. Here, grief itself had a gravity. Her mind brushed the surface of the warp and recoiled. It wasn't a dimension of possibility, it was pure infection. She saw emotion given flesh, will given cruelty, and pain worshipped as godhood. In this galaxy, love was weakness, and despair was divine fuel. The Siege of Terra raged beneath her. Legions of chaos assaulted the walls of the Imperial Palace. Space Marines, the Emperor's angels, fought until their bodies were little more than pulp inside ceramite shells. Titans burned, demon engines howled, and amidst that carnage, she saw one thing that made her heart break all over again. Children, cowering in the ruins, praying to a god who would never answer. She whispered, "No more death." For an instant, everything stopped. Bolter shells hung in the air. Blood froze mid-spray. Even time seemed to hold its breath. Her magic pulsed outward like a heartbeat, rewriting existence in every direction. Demons evaporated, their essence erased at the root, not banished, not killed, but forgotten by reality itself. Warp rifts closed as if ashamed of their own existence. The chaos hordes fell into dust, their corruption undone in a blink. Space Marines who had fallen moments before gasped back to life. Atop the Eternity Gate, Rogel Dawn, Primarch of the Imperial Fists, dropped his hammer and stared. The enemy lines were gone, the dead were standing, and a lone woman walked through the still air, her bare feet touching ground that regrew flowers beneath her steps. "By the throne," whispered a custodian, "she heals the dead." But not all who rose were as they had been. Some Astartes found their armor vanished, their bodies reverted to mortal form, weaker, human, with faces that bore the memories of families long lost. One wept, remembering a wife centuries dead. Another screamed, clutching his chest as a heartbeat returned where there had been none for 300 years. Wanda's eyes softened. You were never meant to be weapons. In orbit, the battle fleets halted. Vox channels filled with confusion. The War Master's ships drifted, their demons howling in terror as reality turned on them. Abaddon, the despoiler, felt something unfamiliar. Fear, as the mark of the dark gods seared and then faded. Khorne's roar of rage shook the Eye of Terror, but Wanda's power bled through even that. Deep in the warp, the Chaos gods awoke fully. They felt the drain, the unmaking of the very substance that gave them life. Slanesh screamed as pleasure turned to numbness. Nurgle's gardens withered into sterile dust. Tzeentch's infinite plans flickered, rewritten faster than he could adapt, and Khorne's skull throne cracked beneath his own wrath. This woman was not a psyker. She was something far worse, a being whose emotions carried law. In the warp, law was death. They struck back, sending waves of unreality against her mind. But Wanda's grief was not a wound anymore. It was armor. Every blow they struck only deepened her conviction. "I lost my children to false gods," she whispered. "I will not lose another world." Below her, the Emperor himself stirred upon the golden throne. His psychic flame brightened, sensing a power that was both divine and alien. For the first time in 10,000 years, his lips parted. The Adeptus, Custodes fell to their knees as his voice echoed through the palace. "Who dares reshape the design of mankind?" Wanda looked up toward the throne, as if she could see him through walls, through time, through death itself. "I do not serve chaos," she said softly. "I serve love." That word rippled through the warp like a toxin. Love had no place there. It was a solvent, dissolving the hatred that sustained its gods. Stars across the segmentum solar flickered, some blinking out entirely as the laws of emotion began to unravel. On Luna, tech priests screamed as their machine spirits went silent. Emotion was their spark. Even the tiniest sentience in their sacred engines required the echo of fear or devotion. Without it, machinery became inert matter. The Mechanicus found their gods falling asleep. The Aeldari far across the galaxy felt something stir in their soul stones. The whisper of Slanesh, their eternal predator, went quiet for the first time since the fall. Eldrad Ulthran opened his eyes in disbelief. "What force could silence the great enemy?" he murmured. Then his Farseer's sight stretched toward Terra, and he saw her, a human witch rewriting the warp by will alone. He felt awe, and then dread, because every emotion she erased fed back into a void that could consume everything. On Terra, the Inquisition reacted first. Inquisitor Karamazov ordered orbital bombardment. He did not care that she had saved billions. Her power was heresy by definition. She rewrote the Emperor's plan. Imperial Navy ships turned their guns towards the palace. But the shells never landed. Wanda raised her hand, and the projectiles dissolved into light. "Violence," she said, "is over." Her voice echoed across Vox channels, across the warp, across every human soul attuned to faith or fear. Millions felt peace for the first time in generations. The Ecclesiarchy's prayers faltered. If there was peace, there was no need for the Imperium. Saint Celestine descended in a blaze of golden wings. She looked upon Wanda and saw not a witch, but a mirror, a vessel of faith born from grief. "You wield power that belongs to the throne," Celestine said, "but you use it without faith." "I have faith in love," Wanda answered. Celestine frowned. "Then you have already fallen." The saint's sword ignited, radiant with divine flame. Wanda sighed. She didn't want another death, but Celestine struck. The sword met invisible resistance, like time itself refusing to move. Then it turned to petals in Wanda's hand. "I will not fight you." Celestine's expression softened. But behind her, the Ordo Hereticus prepared excommunication protocols. To them, this witch was not salvation, but annihilation. Have you ever wondered which of the galaxy's corruptions would claim her first? Drop your theories in the comments. I need to know I'm not the only one thinking about this, because even now, the warp silence began to hum again. The chaos. Gods could not die easily. They began to twist the remnants of emotions still alive in mortals, fear of her, awe of her, love for her, into new reflections of themselves. If chaos fed on emotion, then she was the feast. Within hours, half the galaxy felt her presence. Worlds stopped fighting. Hive gangs laid down arms. Even orcs hesitated, their bloodlust faltering. But Tyranids did not stop. They could not. They were hunger-made flesh. And as they advanced upon a world now without rage or fear, they sensed something intoxicating, a psychic void where they could feed without resistance. The great devourer turned toward Terra. Wanda felt them before they arrived. The hive mind brushed against her consciousness like a cold wind. She tried to understand them, living machines without emotion. For the first time, her magic met something that did not feel. She could not unmake what had never known corruption. Life without soul, she whispered. A mirror of this galaxy's despair. She reached deeper, searching for meaning, and found none. In her old world, pain had always meant love once existed. Here, there were entire species that had never loved at all. And that realization broke her more than any demon could. Her grief deepened. Her power expanded. The warp screamed again, this time in birth pains. For every demon erased, a new possibility began to form. A universe without emotion, without the warp itself. Custodians began to vanish mid-stride. Not by death, but by redefinition. History folded inward. The Siege of Terra never happened. The Horus heresy unraveled. The Emperor sat upon his throne, but now he was merely a man. A father, not a god, and Wanda stood before him, her magic tearing holes through the fabric of cause and effect. "You should not be here," he said quietly. "I'm fixing it," she replied. "You are unmaking what makes us human." Her eyes flickered crimson. Then humanity must start again. And with that, reality shuddered like glass about to break. If you had her power in this universe, would you choose loyalty, heresy, or stay neutral? Tell me in the comments. I'll be reading them. The warp convulsed one last time as the Chaos Gods screamed in collective agony. From their dying roars, fragments of their essence latched onto Wanda's magic, seeking survival. But instead of corrupting her, they began to merge. Her emotions were too vast to be devoured, so the warp reshaped itself around her. The galaxy blinked. Stars realigned, and for a moment, there was peace, until the Emperor whispered, "You have not killed the warp. You have become it." And that was when everything began to die again. The Emperor's words echoed through the quiet palace. The air shimmered with residual magic, the kind that bent space and time into fragile spirals. Wanda stood before him, her crimson aura fading into soft gold. Her eyes searched his, not for defiance, but for understanding. He sat motionless, no longer a god chained to his throne, but a man staring at a universe rewritten by grief. For the first time in millennia, the Emperor felt human again. That frightened him more than death ever could. "Do you understand what you've done?" he asked. His voice carried not through the warp, but through the silence that followed its death. "You've erased the fire that drives existence. Without chaos, there is no will, no hunger, no purpose." Wanda tilted her head, her tone calm, almost kind. "Without chaos, there can be peace. I have seen worlds devoured by emotion. I have seen families torn apart because gods demanded their sorrow. You built a galaxy where people pray to survive. I will build one where they no longer need to." He rose from the throne. The ancient machinery around him groaned as it died. Cables that once drank the lifeblood of 1,000,000 souls now hung useless. The light of the Astronomicon dimmed. Across the Imperium, warp travel stuttered. Fleets became stranded. Planets turned cold. The Emperor took a slow step forward, his golden armor dull without faith to sustain its glow. Peace without choice is not peace, it is oblivion. Outside the walls, the sky rippled. Where the warp had once glowed with madness, now there was an empty expanse, a reflection of her will. Demons were gone. Yet so too were dreams. No one could imagine paradise or fear hell. People simply existed. On the streets of Terra, children played without laughter. Soldiers laid down arms, not from mercy, but because they no longer remembered what victory or defeat meant. Wanda looked upon them from the palace balcony. Her heart felt heavy, yet her mind told her she had done right. But something inside her began to ache. Her power pulsed erratically, as if something unseen was pulling at it. When she closed her eyes, she saw colors she didn't recognize. Fragments of rage, lust, decay, and deceit. The remnants of the chaos gods twisting within her magic. They could not exist without emotion. So they adapted. They began to whisper from within her mind, not as voices, but as impulses. A desire to control, a need to fix, a love that demanded obedience. In trying to destroy them, she had become their vessel. Miles beneath the palace, the Inquisition gathered what remained of its leadership. Karamazov's voice shook with fury. She has erased the warp. She has unmade the Emperor. We face the greatest heresy since Horus himself. Another Inquisitor replied. And yet without the warp, she cannot be fought. Our psychers are powerless. The sisters' faith burns cold. Even the machine spirits do not answer. The flesh remains, Karamazov growled. If the mind cannot defy her, the body must. We will burn her with the oldest weapon known to man, fire. They prepared an orbital strike, crude and desperate. But as the targeting systems calibrated, their screens flickered with static. A soft, human voice spoke through every channel. Why do you still seek to kill what you no longer fear? It was Wanda. She wasn't angry. She sounded almost sorrowful. You don't need to fight me. Just rest. Across Terra, soldiers collapsed mid-step, falling into dreamless sleep. The Inquisition ships drifted into orbit and went dark. The whole world slowed until it felt like time itself had surrendered. Far away, on craft world Ulthwé, Eldrad Ulthran gathered the last of the Farseers. They stared into the void that had once been the warp. The skeins of fate had vanished. There were no futures left to read. She has killed the song of existence, Eldrad said quietly. We walk upon the final note. Another Farseer whispered, Can we reach her? We can try, Eldrad said. But we must cross what remains of the Immaterium, and that path may no longer exist. As they prepared their wraith constructs for travel, something unexpected appeared before them. A ripple of crimson light opened in the air, forming a gate of pure will. Wanda's magic had found them. Her voice came through softly. You were once enslaved to your own emotions. I've freed you. Come, Eldrad. Help me build something better. Eldrad hesitated. And what will it cost? Nothing, she said. Everything. He stepped through. On the other side, he found Terra transformed. The golden city was pale marble now. The banners of the Imperium were gone. People walked quietly, speaking only when necessary. There was no violence, but also no laughter. You have created peace, Eldrad said, his tone flat. But not life. Wanda looked at him. You speak as if life requires pain. It does, he said simply. Even our kind learned that too late. She frowned, and for a moment, her magic flickered. The warp's quiet hum became a faint echo again, a memory of what it had been. Eldrad felt it instantly. You are weakening. The galaxy resists you. I am healing it, she insisted. No, he said. You are suffocating it. For the first time since she arrived, Wanda hesitated. Her magic pulsed outward, touching distant worlds. And she saw them. Hive cities, silent. Orcs standing idle, confused, their instincts fading. Tyranids adrift, starving without psychic prey. Necrons awakening from tombs, finding a galaxy too still for conquest. Even the toe, far from Terra, had stopped expanding. Progress, ambition, fear, all gone. The universe was becoming a mirror of her grief, perfect, empty, dead. Her hands trembled. I only wanted them to stop hurting each other. Eldred's expression softened. That is what every god says before they burn creation. The air quivered again. From the still void beyond the stars, a tremor rippled. The remnants of chaos stirred inside her. They were not gone, merely sleeping. And now, Fed by her doubt, they began to dream. From that dream, new forms began to take shape within her aura, shimmering distortions, each wearing her face. One smiled with cruel serenity. Another wept endlessly. A third whispered in tongues older than time. Each was an echo of her. Rage, sorrow, love, control. The chaos that had once ruled the galaxy was being reborn through her fractured mind. The Emperor felt it, even without his throne. He closed his eyes and whispered, "The wheel turns again." On Mars, the Mechanicus stirred. The silence that had killed their spirits began to shift. Machine shrines flickered to life, but their binary chants had changed. They no longer praised the Omnissiah. They worshipped her. Data prayers spoke of the Red Law, the living code that overwrote imperfection. Wanda's influence had seeped into the sacred logic of machines. Their faith evolved into algorithmic devotion. When she learned of it, she fell to her knees. No, that's not what I wanted. But the more she tried to stop it, the stronger it became. Her magic, built on emotion, now functioned like gravity. Every attempt to change it drew more reality into its pull. Across the galaxy, new cults formed, not of chaos, but of order. They saw her as the final evolution of humanity, the witch who erased sin, fear, and chaos, the universe's silent redeemer. "Do you see now?" the Emperor said quietly from behind her. "You have not destroyed gods. You have become one." She turned to him, her face pale. "Then help me undo it." He shook his head. "No mortal, no being, can unmake belief once it takes root. Even I could not stop the Imperium from worshipping me." Her voice broke. "Then what am I supposed to do?" "End it," he said. "All of it." The words struck her like a blade. For a long time she said nothing. Then, very slowly, she looked toward the stars. "If there must be an ending," she whispered, "then let it be mine." As she rose into the sky, the Emperor felt a pulse of energy so vast it blurred his vision. Across the galaxy, every world trembled. Wanda Maximoff reached into the heart of reality once more. Her power spread, crimson light consuming the void. But this time, it was not grief guiding her. It was acceptance. The remnants of chaos screamed as they were drawn into her. The last echoes of warp energy condensed around her body, forming a sphere of red and gold that burned brighter than any star. Eldrad shielded his eyes as he watched the impossible unfold. A mortal rewriting the fundamental law of the universe again. "Have you ever wondered?" His voice whispered to himself. "What happens when mercy becomes omnipotence?" The light expanded. Space folded inward. Galaxies flickered. And at the center of it all, Wanda Maximoff spoke one final phrase. "No more gods." The explosion was silent. Every psychic trace of chaos vanished. The warp itself collapsed into a single point, and then inverted. When the light faded, there was nothing left but calm. But calm can hide endless decay. Phase 3. Final corruption. Silence had claimed the stars. For the first time in all of galactic history, the Imperium was gone. Warp storms, demons, psychic echoes, all of it erased. The galaxy drifted like a graveyard, quiet and cold. Fleets that once rode the tides of the warp now crawled through real space at a crawl, isolated by endless void. To most, it felt like the end of time. On Terra, the sky was a clear, featureless white. No sun, no dawn, no night, just light, endless and sterile. Wanda Maximoff stood at the heart of the Imperial Palace, surrounded by ruins that did not crumble because there was no entropy left to move them. She had done it. She had ended war, chaos, and fear. But as she looked across the stillness, she realized peace without struggle had no pulse. The universe was breathing its last. The Emperor watched her from the steps below. His golden armor was cracked, his face bare and human once again. Without faith, he was no longer the God Emperor. He was a man who remembered what love once meant. You have achieved what none could, he said quietly. You silenced eternity, and yet you cannot bear the sound of it. She turned to him, her voice soft. It's too quiet. I thought peace would feel like rest. It feels like absence. That is because peace cannot exist without contrast, he replied. Without pain, you cannot know relief. Without darkness, there is no light. You removed the shadow that gives shape to life itself. Her expression trembled. Then I failed. He stepped closer. No, you succeeded too well. She looked down at her hands. They no longer glowed red. They shimmered like glass, translucent and fading. It's still spreading, isn't it? She asked. The silence, he nodded. It is not just the warp you unmade. You are erasing meaning itself. Words no longer carry weight. Symbols no longer bind. Thought no longer creates. She clenched her fists, but even anger felt hollow. The emotion sparked for a second, then dissolved into numbness. I wanted to save them. And you did, he said. But salvation and destruction often wear the same face. Far across the stars, life flickered like dying embers. On Cadia's ruins, the last survivors sat in quiet contemplation, unaware that their thoughts no longer shaped reality. On Macragge, the Ultramarines stood at their fortress gates, no longer feeling duty or pride. They guarded an empire that no longer remembered why it existed. Even the Necrons paused, their mechanical consciousness slowing as logic found no purpose to pursue. Wanda sensed all of it. Each world was a still heart in the body of a dying cosmos. She reached out with her power, desperate to rekindle motion, emotion, anything. But her magic met only reflection, the void she had created. Her wish had come true so completely that even wishes themselves no longer had substance. Then, from within that silence, a faint voice whispered. It came not from the warp, but from inside her own mind. You cannot end us, it said. We are what remains when there is nothing left to feel. She knew that voice. It was her own, or rather, the fragment of her that had become the new essence of chaos. When she had absorbed the 4 ruinous powers, they had not perished. They had dissolved into her psyche, becoming potential, the possibility of emotion itself. They spoke through her thoughts like memories. I destroyed you, she said. No, they replied. You became us. Her hands trembled. For the first time since the Siege of Terra, she felt something pierce the numbness. Fear. It was small, fragile, but real. And in that instant, the void around her reacted. A faint shimmer rippled through the air. The warp, or what remained of it, flickered like a dying flame trying to return. The Emperor felt it too. His head snapped upward, eyes glowing faintly once more. You feel it, don't you? The echo. Life is trying to return. Wanda's voice was shaky. If emotion comes back, so does chaos, so does pain. He nodded. Yes, that is the price. You cannot unmake truth without unmaking existence. Pain is the foundation of all thought. It is the first proof of life. She stared at him, then closed her eyes. I don't want them to suffer again, he smiled sadly. Then you must suffer for them. Her body began to fracture, pieces of light breaking away like glass splinters drifting upward. The galaxy trembled as her magic started to fold inward. She understood what she had to do, not erase chaos, but contain it. Not silence emotion, but bear it alone, she whispered. Then let them forget me. Her voice echoed across the stars. The white sky darkened. Gravity returned. Time began to move again. The warp reopened, not as it once was, but smaller, subdued. Emotion trickled back into existence. Joy, fear, anger, love. Fragile and hesitant. Demons began to stir again, weak but real. Souls burned with purpose once more. Humanity's prayers reignited the Astronomicon. The Emperor stood in awe. She's giving herself to the warp, he murmured. She's becoming the boundary between creation and madness. Her final words echoed as her body dissolved into light. No more death, no more gods, only balance. In that moment, the galaxy was reborn. Terra's skies turned blue again, for the first time in 10,000 years. The people awoke from their stupor, their hearts pounding with renewed emotion. Soldiers cried, children laughed, and in the palace, the Emperor sat once more upon the throne, not as a god, but as a guardian. His light burned steady, not divine, but human. Yet somewhere beyond the veil, within the newborn warp, a figure drifted among the tides of thought and emotion. Scarlet energy rippled from her like auroras across eternity. She no longer had a body, but she was aware. She could feel every soul, every birth, every death, every spark of love or despair. She had become the living conscience of the galaxy. But even gods have limits. As the eons passed, the warp began to shift again. Chaos, patient and cunning, returned in new forms. It whispered through the cracks of her being. She kept them contained, but each whisper reminded her of her humanity, of the grief she had tried to bury. Every time someone across the galaxy despaired, she felt it like a wound. Every time someone loved, it gave her strength. Eldrad Althran, now an ancient memory himself, once spoke of her in visions. There is no longer Slanesh, Nurgle, Khorne, or Tzeentch, he said. Only the Witch in Red, the keeper of the boundary, the one who weeps when we laugh and smiles when we cry. Millennia later, the galaxy would tell stories of a spirit that watched over the warp. The Imperium called her Mater Tranquilla, the Quiet Mother. To the Aeldari, she was the Weaver of Ends. The Toe spoke of her as the light beyond shadow. Each believed she protected them from madness. None knew that she still carried the weight of every sin she tried to erase. And deep within the Astronomican's eternal flame, the Emperor sometimes heard her whisper, not in words, but in feeling. A fleeting warmth that passed through his mind like the memory of sunlight. It reminded him that even in endless war, there could be compassion. He would look up from his throne, stare into the distant stars, and murmur to himself, "You are right, Wanda. Love endures." And beyond the veil, she would answer softly, unseen. Then guard it well. The galaxy moved on. Wars continued. Empires rose and fell. The warp lived again, tempered, restrained by her unseen hand. Chaos could never truly die, and neither could hope. The balance she created would last until another heart, somewhere in the stars, broke deeply enough to try to fix the unfixable again.